The officer thought he was stopping an ordinary man walking home. He had no idea the person in front of him spent his life defending the very justice system he represented. On a quiet evening in a small American city, Marcus Bennett finished another long day of work and stepped outside into the familiar rhythm of his neighborhood. The streets were calm, the lights from nearby homes reflected across the sidewalks, and people moved through their routines without knowing that an important moment was about to begin. To anyone passing by, Marcus looked like any other resident returning home after work. He carried no visible signs of his profession. He wore no symbol that revealed his position. He was simply a man walking through his own community. But beneath that ordinary appearance was a career built around justice, fairness, and responsibility. Marcus Bennett was a prosecutor with the United States Department of Justice. Every day he worked with laws, evidence, and decisions that affected real people's lives. He understood that justice was not about quick assumptions. It was about patience, facts, and the willingness to look deeper before reaching conclusions. Yet on this evening, Marcus was not inside a courtroom. He was not standing behind a desk reviewing legal documents. He was simply walking home, enjoying a rare moment away from the responsibilities that followed him every day. A few blocks away, Officer Daniel Carter was completing his patrol. He had spent years serving his community and believed strongly in the importance of paying attention to his surroundings. His job required awareness, responsibility, and careful judgment. Like many people in positions of authority, he had learned to make decisions based on the information available in front of him. But sometimes the most important information is the information people cannot immediately see. When Officer Carter noticed Marcus, he saw a person he did not recognize. It was a small detail, but small details can influence the way people understand a situation. Marcus noticed the officer approaching and remained calm. He understood that every interaction carried a choice. People could react based on emotion, or they could respond with patience and respect. Throughout his career, Marcus had seen how easily misunderstandings could grow when people focused only on appearances. He knew that the truth often required time to reveal itself. Imagine knowing that one sentence could completely change how someone looked at you. Imagine having the ability to say who you are, explain your position, and immediately change the entire conversation. But imagine choosing not to do that because you believe every person deserves basic respect before anyone knows their title. That was the principle Marcus carried with him. He did not define himself by his position. He defined himself by the way he treated people and the values he followed when nobody was watching. As the evening continued, neither Marcus nor Officer Carter understood the importance of the moment they were sharing. One person saw an unfamiliar individual during a routine patrol. The other understood that every situation deserved fairness before judgment. Neither of them knew that this simple encounter would soon raise deeper questions about authority, responsibility, and the meaning of true justice. Because sometimes the most powerful stories do not begin with people knowing the truth. They begin when nobody knows the full story yet. The evening continued on the quiet streets of the neighborhood, but the simple interaction between Marcus Bennett and Officer Daniel Carter was slowly becoming more meaningful than either person realized. What appeared to be an ordinary moment was actually a test of patience, judgment, and the way people choose to understand one another. Marcus remained calm as the conversation continued. He knew that first impressions could be powerful, but he also knew they were often incomplete. Throughout his years as a United States Department of Justice prosecutor, Marcus had seen how important it was to examine every detail before reaching a conclusion. A single piece of information could completely change the way a situation was understood. That lesson was not only something he applied in courtrooms and legal meetings. It was something he carried into everyday life. Officer Daniel Carter approached the situation from his own perspective. He had spent years protecting his community and believed strongly in the responsibility that came with wearing a badge. His experience taught him to observe carefully, ask questions, and gather information before making decisions. But experience could only reveal what was visible. It could not immediately show the personal history, achievements, or responsibilities of every person he encountered. Marcus understood that better than most. He knew people often reacted to what they saw before they understood what they did not see. He knew that a person's identity was much larger than a first impression. During the conversation, Marcus chose to remain respectful and patient. He could have immediately explained his professional position, but he decided not to make his title the center of the interaction. He believed that respect should not depend on a person's occupation, social position, or influence. Every person deserved to be heard and treated fairly before their background was known. Imagine having spent your entire career defending the importance of evidence and fairness, then finding yourself in a moment where those same principles become personal. Imagine knowing that a few words about your profession could instantly change the way people respond to you, but choosing patience because the lesson is bigger than your own situation. That was the choice Marcus made. He did not want recognition to create respect. He wanted the moment itself to reveal why respect mattered. As Officer Carter continued the conversation, he began noticing something different about Marcus. The man standing in front of him was not reacting with anger or trying to create conflict. Instead, Marcus communicated with a calm confidence that suggested experience beyond an ordinary conversation. His words were careful. His attitude was steady. His presence showed the discipline of someone who understood the importance of remaining thoughtful under pressure. Neither man knew that this encounter would eventually become connected to much larger questions about authority and accountability. At that moment, they were simply two people standing on a neighborhood street, seeing the same situation from different perspectives. Officer Carter saw an unfamiliar person. Marcus saw a moment where fairness mattered. The truth about who Marcus really was remained hidden, but the foundation of the story had already been created. Because sometimes the most important moments of justice begin before anyone knows the complete truth. The quiet conversation between Marcus Bennett and Officer Daniel Carter continued, but neither man understood that this ordinary moment was revealing something much deeper about judgment, fairness, and the way people see one another. The street remained peaceful, the neighborhood continued with its evening routine, and yet a meaningful lesson was unfolding between two strangers who viewed the situation from completely different perspectives. Marcus remained patient because he understood something that many people learn only through experience. The truth is rarely found in the first few seconds of an encounter. Throughout his career as a United States Department of Justice prosecutor, Marcus had worked with complex situations where emotions could easily influence decisions. He had learned that justice required more than quick conclusions. It required listening, examining facts, and recognizing that every person carried a story that was not immediately visible. Those lessons shaped the way he handled this moment. He did not see the interaction as a battle. He saw it as an opportunity to demonstrate the same principles he defended every day. Officer Daniel Carter continued trying to understand the situation. His years in law enforcement had taught him the importance of awareness and responsibility. He believed in serving his community and making decisions based on the information available. But this evening presented a reminder that information was not always complete at first glance. The person standing in front of him had experiences, responsibilities, and a professional background that could not be seen from appearance alone. Marcus knew that revealing his identity would immediately change the atmosphere. The moment Officer Carter learned he was speaking with a federal prosecutor, the conversation could shift in an entirely different direction. But Marcus believed that was exactly why patience mattered. Respect should not appear only after someone discovers a person's achievements. It should exist before any title is revealed. Imagine spending years inside the justice system, teaching others the importance of fairness, then finding yourself in a moment where you must trust those same values personally. Imagine knowing that one sentence could change how people respond to you, but choosing not to say it because you believe the principle is more important than the outcome. That was Marcus's decision. He was not trying to hide who he was. He was allowing the moment to reveal something more important than his position. He wanted people to understand that every individual deserves dignity before recognition. As the conversation moved forward, Officer Carter began noticing details that were difficult to ignore. Marcus's calm voice, his thoughtful answers, his ability to remain respectful while being placed in an uncomfortable situation. These were not the actions of someone trying to create a problem. They reflected the confidence of someone who understood patience and responsibility. Officer Carter did not yet know the full story, but he began sensing that there was more behind this encounter than he originally believed. The person standing in front of him was not simply someone walking home after a long day. He was someone whose entire career was connected to the very ideas being tested in that moment. Yet the most important part of Marcus's character was not his position. It was the way he chose to respond before anyone knew it. Because true integrity is revealed when recognition is absent, and true justice begins when people choose understanding before judgment. The evening continued, and the quiet street remained unchanged on the outside, but the meaning behind the conversation between Marcus Bennett and Officer Daniel Carter was becoming clearer with every passing moment. What began as a simple encounter was slowly revealing a deeper question about how people are judged before their full story is known. Marcus continued to stand with patience and confidence. He understood that moments like this were not only about what happened in front of him. They were also about how people chose to respond when they did not have all the information. As a United States Department of Justice prosecutor, Marcus had spent years studying the importance of evidence, fairness, and careful decision-making. He knew that assumptions could create mistakes, and mistakes could affect real people. That understanding was not just something he applied in his professional life. It was a principle he followed everywhere. Officer Daniel Carter continued observing Marcus, trying to understand the situation from his own perspective. He had built his career around serving the community and believed that responsibility required attention and awareness. He had learned to notice details, ask questions, and make decisions based on what he could see. But this moment carried a reminder that not everything important could be seen immediately. A person's background, experiences, and values were often hidden beneath the surface. Marcus knew the truth about himself, but he also knew that revealing it too early would change the nature of the conversation. If he immediately explained his position, people might respond differently because of his title rather than because of the way he carried himself. For Marcus, that distinction mattered. He believed that respect should not be something earned only after someone discovers a person's achievements. It should be something offered because every person deserves dignity. Imagine having a career built around protecting the idea of fairness, then finding yourself in a situation where you must personally trust that same idea. Imagine knowing that a simple introduction could completely change how another person views you, but choosing to remain patient because the truth is more powerful when it is discovered naturally. That was the path Marcus chose. He was not interested in proving his importance. He was interested in showing the importance of principles. As the conversation continued, Officer Carter began noticing the qualities Marcus displayed. The calm tone, the respectful communication, the ability to remain composed without turning the moment into a conflict. These details created a different impression from the one that existed at the beginning. Officer Carter began wondering who this person really was and why he carried himself with such confidence. There was something about Marcus that suggested experience beyond an ordinary evening walk. But the most important information was still unknown. The officer did not yet understand that the person standing in front of him worked within the same justice system that shaped his own responsibilities as a law enforcement officer. Marcus did not reveal his position because he wanted the moment to prove something greater. He wanted the interaction to show that fairness should exist before recognition. As the night continued, the truth remained just beneath the surface. The encounter was no longer only about two individuals meeting on a street. It was becoming a story about perception, accountability, and the importance of understanding people before deciding who they are. Because sometimes the most powerful revelations happen when the person being judged is the very person who understands justice better than anyone else. The quiet street remained the same, but the meaning behind the encounter between Marcus Bennett and Officer Daniel Carter continued to change. What had started as a simple conversation was becoming a moment that revealed the difference between seeing someone and truly understanding them. Marcus remained calm because he knew that patience was often the first step toward discovering the truth. Throughout his career as a United States Department of Justice prosecutor, he had learned that every situation required careful attention. He had seen how quickly people could form opinions when they only had part of the information. He had also seen how powerful the truth could become when every detail was finally brought into the light. Those lessons shaped the way Marcus handled the conversation. He did not want his professional title to become the reason someone listened to him. He wanted his actions and his character to speak first. Officer Daniel Carter continued trying to understand the person in front of him. He had approached the encounter believing he was following his responsibility to gather information and understand the circumstances. His intentions came from his training and experience, but the moment was reminding him that every situation contained details that could not be recognized immediately. The person standing in front of him was not defined only by what was visible. Marcus represented something much larger than a simple interaction. He represented the idea that every person carries a history that deserves to be understood. As the conversation continued, small details began creating a different picture. Marcus's careful words, his respectful attitude, his ability to remain composed even when the situation was uncertain. These qualities showed a level of confidence that did not come from trying to appear powerful. They came from years of discipline and experience. Officer Carter began noticing that Marcus was not behaving like someone trying to avoid responsibility. Instead, he seemed like someone who understood responsibility deeply. Imagine spending years inside the justice system, helping others understand why facts matter, then finding yourself in a moment where your own identity is unknown and you must trust those same principles. Imagine having the ability to immediately reveal your position and change the entire direction of the conversation, but choosing not to because you believe fairness should exist before recognition. That was the choice Marcus made. He understood that a title could influence how people reacted, but true respect should come from recognizing the value of another person before knowing their achievements. As the evening continued, Officer Carter started to sense that there was something different about this encounter. The conversation was not unfolding like a routine interaction. Marcus carried himself with a quiet confidence that suggested a lifetime of experience handling important decisions. But the truth about his profession remained hidden. The officer still did not know that the man standing before him worked every day to protect the principles of justice. Marcus remained patient because he understood something important. The purpose of justice was not simply to prove who was right. It was to ensure that people were treated fairly throughout the process. The moment was approaching when the hidden truth would finally be revealed. And when it was, the greatest surprise would not be Marcus's title. The greatest surprise would be realizing that the person who appeared ordinary had been carrying extraordinary responsibility all along. The moment before the truth was revealed felt longer than it actually was. The street was still quiet, the evening air was still calm, and the conversation between Marcus Bennett and Officer Daniel Carter continued without anyone realizing how important this encounter would become. For Marcus, this was not simply about explaining who he was. It was about showing why fairness mattered even when nobody knew his position. For Officer Carter, it was a moment that challenged the way he understood observation, judgment, and responsibility. Throughout his career, Marcus had learned that justice depended on more than rules written on paper. It depended on the people who carried those rules into real situations. A decision made too quickly could affect someone's life, while patience and understanding could reveal a completely different reality. That was why Marcus remained composed. He understood the value of allowing facts to appear naturally. He did not want his title to become a shortcut to respect. He wanted the interaction itself to demonstrate why every person deserved to be treated with dignity. Officer Daniel Carter continued reviewing the situation in his mind. He noticed the way Marcus communicated, the way he answered questions, and the way he carried himself with calm confidence. There was a level of professionalism that stood out. It was not the kind that came from demanding attention. It was the kind that came from years of experience and responsibility. Officer Carter began to realize that he might not have understood the complete picture when the conversation started. Sometimes the most important details are the ones that are not immediately visible. Sometimes the person standing in front of you has spent years working in places you would never expect. Marcus knew that moment would eventually require honesty about who he was, but he also knew timing mattered. The purpose of revealing his identity was not to gain special treatment. It was to provide context. There was a difference between asking someone to respect a title and asking someone to consider the full truth. Imagine dedicating your life to protecting justice, then discovering that the same principles you defend professionally are being tested in a personal moment. Imagine knowing that your job title could instantly change the way people see you, but choosing to wait because the lesson is not about your position. It is about the value every person deserves. That was the quiet strength Marcus carried. He understood that real authority was not measured by how quickly people recognized you. It was measured by how you responded when recognition was absent. As the conversation reached a turning point, additional information began to emerge. The details that had been missing at the beginning were finally becoming clearer. Marcus Bennett was not simply someone walking through the neighborhood after a long day. He was a federal prosecutor whose professional life centered around the very ideas being tested in that moment. The discovery changed the atmosphere, but it also created a larger question. If respect appears only after someone's importance is revealed, was that respect truly earned or simply a reaction to status? Marcus did not need the answer to come from a title. He already understood it. The most important measure of justice is not how people treat those they recognize. It is how they treat those whose stories they have not yet learned. And on that evening, everyone involved was about to discover that the person who seemed ordinary was carrying a responsibility far greater than anyone imagined. The truth had finally entered the conversation, but the most important part of the moment was not the discovery of Marcus Bennett's position. It was the realization that the same respect should have existed before anyone knew his name, his career, or his responsibilities. The quiet street where the encounter began now carried a completely different meaning. What looked like a simple interaction had become a powerful reminder that people are often judged before their full story is understood. Marcus remained calm as the details became clear. He did not celebrate being recognized. He did not use his position as a weapon. Instead, he focused on the larger lesson behind the situation. For him, this was never about proving that he was important. It was about showing why every person should be treated with fairness from the beginning. As a United States Department of Justice prosecutor, Marcus had spent years working with the principles of accountability and justice. He understood that systems were only as strong as the decisions made by the people within them. Rules could exist on paper, but their meaning depended on how people applied them in real life. Officer Daniel Carter experienced a moment of reflection that changed the way he viewed the encounter. He had approached the situation believing he was simply doing his responsibility. But now he had to consider a deeper question. How many people had stories he never had the chance to discover? How many moments were shaped by assumptions made before the complete truth appeared? These questions were not easy, but they were necessary. Marcus did not speak with anger. He understood that meaningful change rarely came from humiliation. It came from awareness, honesty, and the willingness to learn. His response showed the difference between seeking revenge and seeking improvement. He wanted people to understand the importance of fairness, not simply remember one difficult moment. Imagine standing in a situation where you have every reason to demand recognition, but instead you choose to create understanding. Imagine having the power to end the conversation immediately by revealing your authority, but choosing patience because the lesson is more valuable than personal victory. That was the choice Marcus made. He believed that justice was not about one person defeating another. It was about creating a system where everyone had the opportunity to be heard and respected. Officer Carter began to understand that the most important lesson from the evening was not about Marcus's title. It was about the moment before that title was known. The moment when Marcus was simply a person deserving the same dignity as anyone else. As the encounter moved toward its conclusion, the focus shifted from individual actions to a much larger conversation about responsibility. A single moment had revealed questions about judgment, authority, and the expectations placed on those who serve the public. Marcus knew that one interaction could become a lesson if people were willing to learn from it. He did not leave the street seeking attention. He left knowing that the truth had created an opportunity for reflection. Because real justice is not measured by how powerful someone appears after their identity is revealed. It is measured by whether fairness existed before anyone knew who they were. The evening ended quietly, But the impact of what happened on that neighborhood street continued far beyond that moment. Marcus Bennett returned to his life with the same sense of responsibility he had always carried, but the encounter created questions that could not simply disappear. What happened was no longer only about two individuals having a difficult conversation. It became a reflection of how trust is built, how authority is used, and how important it is for systems to examine themselves when something goes wrong. Marcus understood that moments like this could become opportunities for improvement. He had spent his career inside the justice system, and he knew that accountability was not about finding someone to blame. True accountability was about understanding what happened, learning from it, and creating better outcomes for the future. That belief shaped the way he responded. He did not want the situation to become a story about anger or personal victory. He wanted it to become a conversation about fairness and responsibility. Officer Daniel Carter also carried the weight of the experience with him. He reflected on the difference between following a process and understanding the person involved in that process. His years in law enforcement had taught him the importance of making decisions carefully, but this encounter showed him that every decision existed within a larger human context. Behind every person was a background, a family, a career, and a lifetime of experiences that could not be recognized instantly. As more attention was given to the situation, the focus expanded beyond the street where it began. Questions emerged about procedures, communication, and the responsibility of institutions that serve the public. A single interaction had opened a much larger discussion about trust between communities and those who hold positions of authority. Marcus knew that meaningful change required more than one conversation. It required people to be willing to look honestly at their actions and the systems around them. Imagine having the opportunity to turn a painful misunderstanding into something that helps others learn. Imagine choosing not to focus only on what happened to you, but also on what can improve because of it. That was the approach Marcus brought forward. He believed justice was strongest when it created understanding, not when it simply created winners and losers. The situation also forced Officer Carter and others around him to consider an important question. How should authority be measured? Is it only about the power to make decisions? Or is it also about the responsibility to make those decisions with fairness and care? Those questions remained long after the original encounter ended. The conversation became bigger than one person's title or one officer's decision. It became a reminder that trust is built through actions repeated over time. Marcus continued his work knowing that the principles he defended were not only ideas written in legal documents. They were values that had to exist in everyday moments. The story of that evening showed that justice does not begin when someone's importance is discovered. It begins when people choose to recognize the importance of every person before they know anything else about them. Because the strongest systems are not measured by how they respond when the truth is obvious. They are measured by how they act while the truth is still unknown. Months after the quiet evening that changed everything, Marcus Bennett continued, walking the same path he had always followed. His work as a United States Department of Justice prosecutor remained demanding, his responsibilities remained significant, and his commitment to fairness remained unchanged. But the memory of that encounter stayed with him because it represented something larger than one conversation between two people. It represented a question that every community must answer. How do we treat people when we do not yet know their full story? Marcus never believed that justice was only found inside courtrooms or written in legal documents. He believed justice was reflected in everyday choices, in small moments when people decided whether to listen or assume, whether to understand or judge. That evening reminded him that every interaction carried meaning, even when nobody realized it at the time. Officer Daniel Carter also carried lessons from that night. The experience became a moment of reflection about the responsibility that comes with authority. Wearing a badge meant having the ability to make decisions, but it also meant accepting the responsibility to make those decisions carefully and fairly. Daniel understood that serving a community required more than experience and training. It required humility, awareness, and the willingness to consider perspectives beyond his own. The story did not end with one person being right and another person being wrong. It became something more valuable. It became a reminder that improvement begins when people are willing to look honestly at themselves. The attention surrounding the situation eventually raised broader conversations about procedures, trust, and accountability. The questions were not only about what happened that evening. They were about what lessons could be learned and how institutions could continue building stronger relationships with the communities they served. Marcus supported that approach because he understood that meaningful justice was not created through division. It was created through responsibility and understanding. Imagine a world where people only show respect after learning someone's achievements, profession, or influence. Imagine if dignity depended on a title, a uniform, or a position. Marcus believed that was the opposite of true justice. A person's value should exist before their identity is revealed. Their humanity should come before their accomplishments. That belief was the reason he chose patience instead of anger, conversation instead of conflict, and progress instead of personal victory. The encounter between Marcus Bennett and Officer Daniel Carter became a reminder that hidden stories exist everywhere. The person standing beside you may have faced challenges you cannot see. The person you meet for only a few minutes may carry years of experience, responsibility, and purpose. That is why fairness must come before assumptions. The strongest lesson from that evening was not about a job title or a legal position. It was about a simple truth that applies to everyone. Justice is not only measured by what happens after the truth is discovered. It is measured by how people act before the truth is known. Because in the end, a badge represents authority, a title represents achievement, but character determines whether people truly understand the meaning of justice.